The very top line at the end of that line. We are still on the topic of the effect of tzimtzum, but the effect of tzimtzum upon ohrot as opposed to kelim. To identify what is the effect of tzimtzum on ohrot. As we discussed, that ohrot always represents the source, does not become a separate mesias. So, what is the significance of a tzimtzum and what is the result of tzimtzum? Because we are saying that there's sphirot agnuzos, as they are before the tzimtzum, as they are connected to the Ein Sof, a part of the Ein Sof, they would not be suited to be slavish in world, in Chassidus. But then, when there's a tzimtzum, that permits there's a sphirot agnuzos to come down and to be slavish in world. Or be affected by tzimtzum. We come finally to the point, to the principle of Shemesh, names. And we discussed, and the Rebbe points out, that Shem is of tremendous significance, and it relates very closely to the etzem, as we see that the name arouses a person even from a deep faint. Nonetheless, the name is not the neshama itself. And such as we see that the neshama, before it came down into the goof, it did not have a name. Okay, we continue now on the second line, and the end of the first line. The neshama kedim stapshusa b'guf l'hoya l'shem. The fire to be slavish in the goof, the neshama did not have a name. Only when the neshama is mislabish in the goof, that is when the neshama requires a name. The hainu, which means to say, the Hashem who shemekasher as haneshama im haguf. It is the name that brings about this hiskashus of the neshama with the goof. Now we're going to, so to speak, touch this very briefly because we already discussed it quite extensively. Name is that which identifies even the neshama, the ohr, whatever it is. The meaning of name is to identify it to the outside. And the identification of by name is not a functional identification. Like the name of a person does not tell you that he is a carpenter or anything else. The name this is his proper name. It identifies his presence in the world. And yet, even though the presence is there without the name is what actually brings his presence into actuality into the world. As you pointed out, this is the reason that a baby is named as soon as it's born, before he begins to function. Because its very presence in the world is to be recognized, and it deserves a name. How is name giving it cognizance? Prior to naming the baby, the baby is true to itself. And one can know that there is a baby, but that baby has not yet been identified as part of the world. From a worldly perspective, he has not been given an identity. The name is what gives it that identity. Now this is, it would seem almost like this is for the sake of the world. They say, I want to know how to refer to this person. So I give it a name, so I have a means to refer to it. But we find, as the Rebbe points out, that the name or the person is of such profound significance of the person that he will respond to his name under all circumstances, even in faint. How does that occur? The name is an add-on to the neshama. So how does it then reach in so deeply that it brings him back even from faint? So already discussed it. The answer is, the explanation is that which enables us to kind of focus in on this. The neshama, in its very fact that it exists, that it came down into the world, it came down into the world with a godly mission. And therefore, because of this godly mission, it already knows, even though it doesn't have a name, but it already knows that it has a mission. The name is what enables it to begin to function in accomplishing this mission. Prior to that, it isn't into itself. The name is what gives it a place in the world, and then it can function in the world. Otherwise, it is just what it is unto itself. To function in the world, it absolutely needs a name. And here is where we have the opportunity to really focus in what's behind that. Why does it need a name in order to function in the world? So the best way to present it, I thought, is from something similar that we already discussed on a different level. He said there was the Oyesh in Nivra B'Yom Rishon, light that was created in the first day of creation. That light was really light, and it made a day. And yet that light and world could not make a partnership. As the Gemara says, that light was nignas, was concealed. And then it was brought back in the form of the luminaries and so forth. And as we said many times, this is the Rambam, that the luminaries, the sun, actually replicates. It actually brings forth back the oil Shenivra B'Yom Rishon. So what's the difference? It's the same light. Even if it's less in intensity, that doesn't change that. It's still the same light. It's still a godly light. Like we said, the principle of day, in the Torah it says, Vayikra Elokim lo oir yoim. That Hashem named oir yoim. What's the difference between oir and yoim? The difference is oir is a functional aspect that has an active means of presence. Even to the extent that in the world we translate oir as the result of some combustion and some activity in the sun. But day is a completely different thing. Day is that which transforms the materials of the world. Day is what tells the world that there is a creator, there's a reality behind you. This is what day is. This day element was created in the first day of creation. And yet the world cannot correlate to the world. And then it had to be concealed and brought back in the form of a mission from the sun. What's the difference? The difference is that before that it was there without a luminary, without a worldly means of explaining where it's coming from. After that it was removed and brought back to the sun, now we say, oh, it's the sun where the light is coming from. Its godly phenomena is now camouflaged a little bit. Although the principle of day is not a worldly concept. World cannot understand day. Nonetheless, now that it has a means of reference, it can be sustained. I pointed out a very interesting aspect that Eibishter created the world, and then he created Adam Rishon, and he assigned Adam Rishon with the task of naming all the creatures, except for a few. One of them is day. Day, God himself named day. Why not let Adam name it day? Adam is extremely wise, and he can name all the creatures, but he can only name finite creatures. Infinite creatures he couldn't name. Day could be named only by its creator. The whole phenomenon of giving a name to day is a fantastic concept. Because naming, as we know it, naming is in contrast to something else. Day is not a presence in contrast to anything else. In day there is no darkness. Taking this analogy from to the neshama is a godly light, a godly truth, and therefore, to be present in the world, it has to be somehow identified. Because the world cannot relate to anything that is not identified. Like we said, light, day, is present in the world. It cannot relate to it. In the world, in order to relate, you have to find worldly parameters by which you identify it.
You're saying world cannot relate to day?
Right.
Until it's named.
Until it came from the sun, and now you relate it to the sun. Not day, the truth of day itself. So the neshama, as it is in its truth, could not relate to the world, except as a result of its musabish in the goof, and how there's musabish in the goof through the name. In other words, it acquires, by name it acquires a quality of world level parameters. A name identifies it as a presence in the world. Okay. So the neshama to itself did not need a name, did not have a name. Rak, okay, the second line. Only when the neshama is mislabish in the guf, that is when it requires a name. Which means to say, the Hashem who shemekasher is anshomi maguf. The name is what binds the neshama with the guf, as we explained now with this analogy of day. Because name is a worldly parameter, a means of reference, which means it's identified within worldly viewpoint, and that's why it can now be established in the guf. We're on the third line in the middle. Similarly, the Inyan is Lamailo. Lamailo means higher than that which comes into the world, like the neshama in the guf. Talking about Lamailo the way it is above in the ohrot elikim, prior to the tzimtzum, the way it is in the lakus per se. Inyan Hashemois, who, with the function of Shemois and the whole point of Shemois, of names, is l'kasher as ha'oir im ha'keili. It is to tie and to bind the oir with the keli. Again, every word over here requires a little presentation and elaboration. L'kasher ha'oir im ha'keili. oil, just to take an example, where is the discussion of oil with the keli? So I'm sure you guessed it. They have a table. And as mentioned many times, all of these inyonim that human beings use are rooted in the neshama, in the human intellect, in the human spirit, which is a God-given spirit. So the principle of a table, as I said, a home, in Odom, in Beis, in the Odom, the principle of the table, let's look to the table for the time for this moment. The principle of the table is reflective of what the human being is. The Moshe says, "Oecha b'shuk ve'emelikev." It's reflective of the principle of what the human being stands for. This thing a human being stands for, this super presence, is clearly its godly influence. Because he has a godly assigned mission, presence. So therefore it has this kind of a status. A table is an imperative inyan in a human life. And then, this is the way it is in an essential level. Then when it comes down to the practical level, where the neshama is mislabish in a goof, and he has to function in the world, then you have the translation of the inyan of a table into a physical entity, that's called the keli. And in order to correlate this neshama concept of a table to a physical table, that concept has to be named. And this is the name that is then assigned to this design, to this format, what's called the table. And this is how these two things are bound and correlate. I'm briefly this now because we already discussed this phenomenon many times before. Similarly, Lamailo, Shemesh is Lekasha Sehoyer Makeli. It serves to be Kasha. Now with the shame is given to the oir. But as a result of the fact that the oir has a name, it can now be identified with a keli. When the oir it's a neutral oil above a godly oil on the godly level, it does not have a worldly reference, it cannot be mislavish in a keli. Who is with me? Yeah?
I need a little bit more elaboration.
Well,
what is that where it's not? It does not yet need.
we spoke about this the whole time. The oil, I just now finished saying, what is a table?
Oh, wait a second. I asked you a question.
Yeah.
Where you mentioned that the Maila, when the or before it is shaykh to a keli, right? It doesn't have a name. I ask you, where is that?
That is the oil shlifnei tzimtzum.
This is the sphirot agnutus.
Sphirot agnutus prior to the tzimtzum. Okay? That settles it.
Because we spoke about the Maila, the orb.
Yeah,
before
exactly.
it's shaykh to a keli and afterwards.
Mm-hmm. The point of Lamaila, I translated the way it is in our orientation. In the human being also there is Lamaila, and then when it's Mislabish in a Keli. We point out all the time that all human activity relates back to his very life element, his very intellect.
In that regard, about the table, where the table is a concept, is that or of the person yet in reference to a keli, or this is, we call that before the tzimtzum?
That's before the tzimtzum. If the Gemara says, let's take it to without a table, it's not a human being. Are we going to say that the table makes a human being a human being? Clearly, it is a translation of something human at the lower level. In a cave. So the shame is the Inyan Shem is lekasher ha'oir im hakli. So with all the chambers and the analogies that we presented, we said that this a table in a keli and a table the way it is in the nefesh, it's basically the same thing, except that in the nefesh it is reflective of what the nefesh is, and a keli and a table physically is reflective how it translates in the world. And the great thing about the human being is that he lives in the world the way he truly is in his nefesh. But of course it goes through various processes. And as we said, ultimately, when a person sits at a table, he feels at home, he feels comfortable. And without a table, he feels uncomfortable. Who is it that feels uncomfortable? This is the oil of the nefesh itself. Something is wrong. Okay, so now we have Lamailo, this is the way it is in essence of the nefesh, or Lamailo, the way it is in essence of Agmuzis prior to the tzimtzum. And then for Shema is Lekasher is Ha'oyer Makeli. And we explained what is this name that allows this Hiskasha, this connection. Very simple thing. The name is an external reference. Once he has an external reference, he's no longer exclusively aware of itself. Now he has a presence from an outside perspective. From an outside perspective. And that's where it can be connected to a key. All the way to the point, whereas we're talking about a table, one can say, what's a table? A table is a util presence. It's invented from a practical viewpoint. We say, no, that's not the case. But it can actually be argued. A table is the result of some kind of inconvenience that the person saw, and he found a way to make it convenient. If that were the case, we would not say if he doesn't have a table, he's like a dog. Okay? This is it for this morning. We are the fourth line, Imakli.